With no qualifications, Jensen Huang or Sam Altman?
AI is going to be the new electricity of the world.
What's one AI trend you think is overhyped?
It will replace human creativity.
The very first customer showed faith in India and in us and cut a check for and said that, okay, by this date, I need a server in India or you can return the check.
And any examples of funny prompts that you use with ChatGPT?
Not for me, but like I once saw Saisha, she was asking Chat to tell some gossip because she wants to make her life interesting. And then it replied back with a very personal Dharma story.
India should not become a digital colony. We were literally designing our own servers. We invented cloud before cloud was a word.
Would you change anything about yourselves that would have taken the company on a different path? Welcome to another episode of Season 4 of the Blume podcast, this season's theme being Destiny Avenged. Today we are joined by Tarun and Srishti, the co-founders of E2E Networks, a Blume Fund 1 company. Scrappy builders and a married couple who set out in 2009 to challenge the hyperscalers with an audacious promise: 80% of the functionality at 40% of the cost. They did so by serving customers obsessively, staying capital efficient, and betting early on where the market was headed. They took the uncommon bet of going public early with an SME IPO in 2018, one that was oversubscribed over 70 times. Then rode the post-IPO seesaw with grit to hit over $1 billion in market cap at the peak. Today, they trade somewhere at the halfway mark of that. Along the way, they kept reinventing an India-first cloud to self-serve, then a bold pivot to GPUs in 2018 with NVIDIA V100s well before anyone heard of NVIDIA or the AI wave had crested. We'll unpack the near misses, the hard wins, the IPO calculus, and how E2E is building India's GPU cloud while guarding the scrappy DNA that got them here. Season 4 of the Blume podcast is in collaboration with IDFC First Bank and Ultrahuman, one of Blume's portfolio companies. Welcome to the podcast, Tarun and Srishti. I'd love to go back to the beginnings, Tarun. I mean, that's what this podcast has been about. We'd love to get to know founder journeys, founder stories, the grit. Did you think of this as a calling? Did you think of it as your destiny? That's a theme this year. So I know we were first introduced in 2010. I think E2E was born in 2009. And very audacious, right? They were already big, large, giant American hosting companies.
Not in 2009.
Really?
2009, like you could either host in a data center in the US or you could try and tie up with some of the large ISPs in India to get some colo space.
Like a NetMagic equivalent.
NetMagic was, I think, it was present.
Okay.
So all the big data centers and ISPs were very expensive.
And
they all wanted a contract for 3 years, 5 years from a small startup.
So if you go a step back and say, who's Tarun? And of course, I'd love to ask Srishti as well, your better half. But who's Tarun Dua that he actually came up with this idea that this was all a market, this was a need? So walk us through a little bit of your background on why this problem even arose in your head. And why did you think E2E was a solution at that point?
Okay. So a part of my journey was spent in the US. I think I might have spent 6-7 months working in the Valley through an outsourcing company. And over there, I kind of like went to a Linux user group meeting where a small startup which used to call itself Flickr of Videos was presenting. That turned out to be YouTube. Now nobody knows Flickr, but at that time, YouTube called itself like Flickr of Videos.
And Flickr was acquired by Yahoo.
Flickr was acquired by Yahoo. So YouTube was kind of like happened because there was enough compute available in the Valley. Like there were enough providers in US who could give you like a dedicated server for $100. No questions asked. You could like take it, return it. Like it was completely contractless. Compared to India, where we saw that only biggies could afford to have like local servers and local content and faster delivery through like having a lower latency to their audience. So what I thought was that like that's a gap in the market. The big guys who are well funded can afford to have local hosting. The small guys can't afford that. And again, in the Valley, the culture was that like small guys will become big guys. So that we thought was our entry point into the market, where you could do dedicated servers and VPS servers and any kind of contractless compute in India. So we started doing that. Our original idea was that host the servers in Singapore. Then the very first customer showed faith in India and in us and cut a check for 30,000 rupees and said that, okay, by this date, I need a server in India or you can return the check.
Who was the first customer?
So that was an ex-colleague.
Okay.
They continued to remain a customer for a very, very long time. We still speak sometimes.
Yeah.
So the customer number one, CRN number one remained there for, I think, 15, 16 years of our existence.
Lovely.
So that was that. Basically, we started off. So we had a couple of friends who were doing Nolarity and they had cracked some deal with a local data center. So we rode on top of their deal that, okay, you are already selling to these guys. And we negotiated a small contract where our costs were far in excess of the revenue that we were going to get from that 30,000 rupee check on a monthly basis. So we were in business, and initially we had a very small static website. We just listed the prices and had a contact number, call us, and practically for most part it was me racking and stacking the servers in the DC and doing the customer support and also answering the sales calls. So for a while it was like that until so there was somebody who had a lot of servers in the US. They were looking for some other Tarun. So it was a wrong number. This person called me and I was like, no, I'm not that Tarun. Then I reverse looked up on Google. Okay, who is this person? Okay, this person has a lot of web workloads, runs a lot of websites, has a team. So I was called him back the next day morning and I was yeah, I wanted to talk to you. You spoke to me yesterday, but some other context. So this guy was a true startup guy. He said that, yeah, so come back tomorrow to meet me at our office. And same day he cut a check. So he was okay, I'll take your servers as long as you can deliver 99% uptime. We'll do business with you. And that became a customer that brought in their competitors. So a competitor of theirs called and asked me why are their websites so fast? They're okay, one is we are hardworking people. We have fine-tuned their servers. We know Linux. We know web scale. We know load balancing and all that stuff. The other part is the servers are in India. So they were okay, let us also try out. And that competitor again turned out to be someone who was very well known in the startup community.
Why aren't you naming anyone? You can name people.
So this was Amit Jain from CarDekho.
Yeah. Okay.
So then they became a kind of a inflection customer for us.
Yeah,
we even got called by Flipkart because CarDekho was our customer. And I think for the next 6-7 years, we never had any salespeople. Every year we grew more than 100%. And mostly it was word of mouth in the startup and digital native space. We kind of in that era, we acquired customers. I think out of 120, 125 unicorns in India today, I think 15 of them were born in that era. And most of them were born on E2E's compute infrastructure.
Amazing. So we built a story that's rarely been told in some sense.
Right.
And that's also, before I come to you, Srishti, I think while you joined the company, we joined the company before you. So, it's a rare case where we have the opportunity to bring one of our own portfolio companies. So for the folks who don't know in the audience, Tarun's a Fund 1 Blume company, one of our very first checks. Srishti would know this, but I don't know how much of the history you know. We pretty much borrowed money to invest into Tarun.
So I called up a friend and got the company incorporated.
Okay.
In 2009.
Okay. Amazing. And so you've been there from day one.
Yes.
We got introduced through Freeman, who's a very interesting character.
Right.
He plays the Sutradar.
Right.
In this
I think
story.
He got a 10,000x multiple or some crazy number like that.
A few thousand x multiple. So the story goes, and it's embarrassing, but I will disclose it in public. Freeman was running a incubator space and an accelerator space in Bangalore called Jaga. And we were introduced to him, and we would find a bunch of startups in that space. And in one of those conversations, he said, you should evaluate Tarun. And I said, who's Tarun? He said, I used to work with him in Pune. Yeah, so this is a good point to introduce ourselves into the picture. It's not very often that we have guests who are also our portfolio companies. We're waiting for more of our portfolio companies to become superstars like you guys so that we can bring them onto the show. But, Blume obviously started the journey with you as well in 2010-11. Probably one of the first checks we wrote. Srishti, I know you mentioned that you incorporated the company in 2009, but we actually, even before Blume was incorporated, but we didn't have a first close done. And we wanted to back Tarun, and we got introduced by Freeman, who's quite the character. And as Tarun just remarked, he's like a guy who's made a few thousand X on this investment, unlike us who sold too early. But Freeman made the intro and said, we used to run into him in Jaga in Bangalore. For people in Bangalore, by the way, little piece of history, where the current Subco and the Nara noodle bar exist, is where the second Jaga space existed. So I think you haven't gone there in a while. So Freeman moved from across the hockey stadium to there and then left the country. But he used to have all these collection of young founders. And we've actually, even our current Sprinto founders, we first met there. So a lot of history going back to that first meeting with Freeman. And Freeman, I think, had worked with you. And he said, Tarun's trying to build something interesting. And cloud hosting has to take off in India. There are no native players, and you should meet him. That's how we met. And why did you ask us for such little money, by the way? What were you trying to build with such little money that you even asked us?
So we had no clue. So basically, I think the question you asked was that, okay, what will make a difference for you to get to the next level?
I still ask the same question. Right?
So I thought that money is enough. That's a lot of money. I think we built 5 lakh MRR or 6 lakh MRR with just about 25 lakh rupees of my own money. So what I thought was that if we could get another 25 lakhs, something like that, we could probably double or triple it, and that would prime us for a Series A. So
it's not like we haven't disclosed it. I know, you've seen the Omega files, so we disclosed everything that we did in Fund 1, but maybe people haven't seen the fine print.
Sure.
Tarun's round in grand total was 35 lakh rupees, right? Which people won't even accept as salaries nowadays. and we played 28 of that, and Freeman played 7.
Right.
Full credit to him, 20% of the round. Right? And it was at a royal ransom price of 2 crores post money.
Right.
Okay. This is embarrassing, but I have to admit that that's how cheap you let us in. And we're grateful for that. And that was the beginning of the journey. And you just, I don't think you were profitable all through after that. But
we were always cash profitable. We always made cash.
But tell me, around that time, Amazon and AWS became a force.
They all started coming to India, I think around 2014, 15. Initially, they all set up around Singapore.
Okay.
And in India proper, I think they started coming out another 2-3 years.
So your pitch used to be low latency. I remember that was a buzzword.
Right.
Because you were the only guy in India who could offer this.
Right.
In some sense.
And who actually targeted digital natives who didn't want long contracts, who didn't want to worry about how to deal with a large organization. They were pick up the phone, I need something, you deliver it, and they pay you after a week, sometimes even after 6 months, but we were okay at that point of time. So we trusted people, and I think initially we never had any issues.
And Srishti, what prompted you to be just the the supportive wife to saying, no, I think this is going to get big enough that I should also, the whole household should put everything that they have in terms of opportunity and risk into this entity.
So I'll take you back to my story.
Yeah, please.
I met Tarun in 2007.
Yeah.
And it was an arranged marriage setup, and it didn't work out, and we parted our ways.
I told everyone we had a love marriage.
Then in 2009 March, he contacted me again. We had Orkut at that time. He said, let's meet up. And then both of us decided to get married. And he said, I'm going to do my
second time love. You fell back in love.
No, we just met and decided to get married.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. So 2009, June, we got married. And he was sitting with one of his, the other partner at that time. And he was writing code. And my families had matched the horoscopes. He told everyone that I had no income. It was zero income.
He said zero income.
He said zero income. And my family said, horoscope match ho raha hai, kuch to kar hi lega. So that was the setup. And I called up a friend and got the company incorporated in August 2009.
Okay.
And see, I resisted joining E2E for a long time. My point of view
and by
was,
training, you are a CA.
Yes.
And so
I was working, I started my career at PwC, then I was working with HPCL. And PwC was very, very hectic. And I thought I'll join a PSU and my life will be all set, like 9 to 5 job. But then I think I was destined to do something else. And then...
so the decision to join Tarun full-time, that is where we were.
Oh, he was after my life. He convinced me, literally we sat down and he convinced me every single day. I said, my point of view was that like we should have at least some stable source of salary. You are running a startup. I am working with HPCL. But then things started looking up in 2013. And then I finally quit.
Awesome. And then I remember, Tarun, you're still a relatively small company. I don't know if you recall the trajectory. So as you said, when we met, I think you were exactly there, 4-5 lakhs a month kind of ARR, MRR.
Right.
And in your head, if you can recall vaguely, what did that trajectory look like, just for the viewers to understand how long this took for you to sort of fulfill your destiny?
Right. So we had a very small revenue base every year, I think. So every year we would make it like a couple of times, and we were like, we are growing so fast, like we should definitely get funded. So then it was very spray and pray-ish, like we never had any great advisors in terms of what a VC is looking for, and a lot of investors were scared of like, okay, one day all these big guys are going to come in and they're going to take away your compute business. So I think that started happening in 2015 onwards, but then for first 3 years we didn't even feel the effects. So mostly for it was like our customers were happy with us. Nobody even looked out until like the big guys, they could spend a lot more money than us on customer acquisition. And then it became very, very clear that like, okay, we are not really going to get funded by the VCs. So then we started exploring other options of kind of like scaling up the business. I think that's where somewhere like in your office, we met someone who wanted to help small companies get onto the SME board. And we were like, okay, maybe this is something we can do.
We'll come to that. That's a different story. You need to inspire a lot more people to think in that fashion. So we'll come back to that. But let's go back to the married couple relationship. I think there's generally a broad... I've heard it so often that it's almost jarring that, married couples don't make great co-founders. and you shouldn't back companies where, especially tech startups where, husband and wife are co-founders. So in that sense, you tricked us because you were not a co-founder originally. And then you came back in. But jokes apart, over the next 10 years, you've evolved. You joined CFO, now you're COO. How does that relationship work? What are the pros and cons of actually being a couple who run a company?
Tarun is a very ambitious person, right? And I have to he's always soaring in the sky with his big ideas. And I think I am the one who has to bring him to the ground, show him the financial discipline, show him the strong financial numbers. And now we are at a place where we trust each other so much. And I think we have set a rhythm. He has his own things to handle. I have my own things to handle. So the separation of duties, it's very, very clear for us.
And when it comes to your working style in office, you're distinct, and at home you're chatting about work, or is it become all one and the same?
I think the biggest disadvantage is that work spills over. Yeah. We only talk about two things, which is E2E and Saisha, our daughter.
Yeah.
So there is no separation of work and office now.
Understood. So it's become a healthy obsession in some sense.
Yes, it is. It has.
So we kind of decide that no more work today. So no discussion on work. And then 10 minutes later, we are talking about work. Then sometimes we decide no more discussion about Saisha. She is away. Let us have our own conversations without work.
How old is she
Saisha.
Now?
She's 13 now.
Yeah.
So then again, that also spills over. So kind of it's hard to maintain those boundaries.
And for the viewers, the history goes back so much that, when in the early days of Blume, I used to optimize my car rides from place to place. And Tarun was a very good driver for me. so we used to...
I always used to get the airport ride meeting.
Right.
And I had this like dinky car and the back seat was loaded with stuff.
Maruti Zen.
So I didn't know which one. I thought it was a Hyundai, but it's a Maruti Zen. And the back seat used to be always trashed.
That was actually Srishti's car.
He would take whatever was in the front seat, throw it in the back seat. It's like, Karthik, this is your seat.
Blue car, right?
Yeah. And so that was one. And then I think even your kid was born during that phase. So we've seen everything. We've seen the entire journey. Short of you coming for your wedding, we've seen everything around.
Oh, Freeman came to our wedding.
Freeman came to your wedding. Fantastic. So, we never succeeded in convincing anyone that this was a venture backable model.
Right.
Why do you think that was? I mean, and it's not like both of us didn't try. I mean, from Blume's side, we tried. We were the only investor for you till you went public. And you obviously, it's your life and sweat and blood.
I think in a way, we were so set in our ways of doing the business. So where we took the decision that, okay, today we are chasing revenue. So we are chasing revenue. And I think the initial conversations were about like, okay, but you guys are not doing any product. You don't have a product roadmap. We're like, okay, once we have the money, we'll build a product roadmap. But are you guys capable of building the product? So chicken and egg over there. Like if you are like hand to mouth in terms of like what your customers are asking you for, plus the credit situation in India for startups at that point of time was not great. So nobody would lend you money. Nobody is giving you equity. So whatever you are earning, you are reinvesting back into hardware. So essentially at the end of the month, like usually there is only enough OPEX money for maybe like 2-3 months, I guess. So
3 months run rate.
Three months was Srishti's discipline that, mostly you need to have like 3 months of money in the bank at least. So it was always that, okay. And then the unkindest cut was when someone asked that, okay, why haven't you grown more? And I was like, there is literally no way to have grown more than this. Yeah. Because simply that like everything...
You're doubling with no cash, just with bootstrap.
Right. Yeah. Because all the cash is going back into the infrastructure and hardware. And there was like, you could have done nothing basically. There were no banks lending you money. Like whatever they could have lent you, you took that.
When did we get a debt breakthrough in the company?
I think Sidby was the one who kind of like gave us the debt for the first time.
That was a very small amount.
That was a small amount. I think it was like
2 CR.
But like I think we remember signing some
endless
150
number of documents. Yes.
Basically gave up your life if anything went wrong. Yeah.
And I think we got some from private banks also, 50 lakhs, 50
after
lakhs.
Sidby, then we kind of like syndicated some other loans.
So many documents were required.
Yeah, no, but we always educate founders that if you truly believe in your business and you need to get debt started somewhere, especially in certain business models.
Right.
And it is risky, it takes time, but if you don't, the second guy never comes up.
Right.
The first chance that you get to establish your creditworthiness in the debt world, it's an important milestone. And you required it all through. In fact, you grew without any equity capital, other than maybe one other small round.
We grew without debt, without equity capital, just on the basis of accruals. And
for about 3-4 years,
And the small checks from Blume and myself.
Till 2018, we had raised only 3 crores.
Yeah. I remember. So we'll come to that. So let's maybe cut over to the IPO in a bit. But just the funding journey for those who don't know this, E2E was pretty much Tarun going, begging, borrowing from his family and getting some money in, and Blume going and scraping the bottom of its reserve barrel and bringing some money in. And to what Srishti said, it's correct. We grand total of 3 crores of equity across multiple infusions over a 7-year, 8-year period, right? But you had a lot of debt as you kept growing, right?
That was much later. Much later. So we always had a reasonable amount of debt which we could service.
And just to finish that trajectory timeline, in 2015, what scale would you have been?
2015, we might have been between 20 to 30 crores of annual revenue.
No, I think that was closer to your IPO. You were at 35.
2017-18 was 35 CR.
Yeah, which is the full
revenue. Previous year was 30 crores. I think previous year was 15 crores.
Yes.
So 15 might have been like 10 to 15 crores.
Our seasoned partner Ultrahuman is back for a second time. I'm biased as the seed investor here, but their immensely loved brand is making waves globally. Ultrahuman is a health tech pioneer redefining how we track and improve our health. Their sleek titanium ring air and its new rare metal cousins accurately track sleep, movement and recovery to deliver real-time health insights and personalized nudges. Ultrahuman is creating a unique health ecosystem built on top of the wearable data. It's just launched Blood Vision in the US in addition to India, a blood testing service that offers a panel of over 100 longevity and chronic disease biomarkers with the convenience of an at-home test. They're also launching Ultrahuman Home globally for environment-aware analysis and sleep insights. Whatever your health fix, go sign up and experience being truly ultrahuman. We've heard obviously we've heard this from our research. We know you well enough, so we know this about you. You're like this super disciplined CFO. You just said 3 months of cash has to be in the bank. We're not letting this company die.
Yes.
If you weren't there, would he have killed the company?
Likely.
Maybe.
So it also shows that's a very peculiar situation where, of course, he trusted you as his wife, and as a co-founder. But if you don't have good money management,
I was really bad at numbers.
Yeah,
so,
and if you're not good at money management, then you get in trouble a lot, even in a legitimately good business. Right?
So I was really surprised in the first year that we made a profit. So I was like, we made a profit? How? I don't see any money in the bank.
The first financial accounts were drawn by me on piece of paper.
Awesome. And in your life, in those 6-7 years, did you feel like you're really vulnerable and the business could be in trouble, or you were missing payroll, or how do you handle stress, and how do you handle Tarun's crazy dreams and balancing that out with fiscal discipline?
The most important part for me, so I had a toddler at that time, and my team was sitting out of our bedroom in our Faridabad house. And I was shushing her all the time. Please don't make noise. Bhaiya is working from the next room. And obviously she's a toddler. She would scream. So that was the difficult part.
Balancing work and
motherhood. But I think we were never at a situation where we didn't have the money to pay the salaries.
Awesome.
So we always
cash
had
management was quite disciplined, but we had other challenges in our lives. So I think in that era, we were using say multiple ISPs, and that used to be a very competitive business. So the ISPs would kind of pay other ISPs to cut fiber cables and we would end up suffering over there. Okay, what happened? A municipality dug the fiber cable. What happened? Somebody
ISPs
cut
are
the fiber cable.
internet service provider.
Internet service providers.
Services
So our
going
business
down.
is you are sitting in a data center, we are dependent on the ISPs. And somewhere or the other, the infrastructure in India at first couple of years, that was not really great. I think by 2015-16, things started improving in terms of infra. We started to, I think 14 onwards, we started to get great uptimes and everything. Before that, it used to be that, okay, tonight, what has happened? Again, I would leave her alone at house and drive to the data center and see okay, what happened? So,
I think that's something that we've consistently seen about Tarun Dua, right? You're obsessed about, uptime, operational efficiency, getting into the tech, getting into the guts of the machine, obsessed about customer reliability.
Mm-hmm.
How did you manage to build that culture? How did you balance that out with, being a CEO in that sense, which is far more broad-based?
Mm-hmm.
Even as someone like me has grown up in the firm, I find it very difficult to balance all of this.
So I think initial few years, because we had no cash and there was no visibility of cash coming from anywhere, either as debt or equity. So we were very obsessed with managing the costs. So managing the cost meant that we were literally designing our own servers, although we were not physically assembling them. But it was usually our server design. We would pick the processor. We would say that, okay, we are going to scale up this processor alone. So don't have multitude of things. So any customer who came to us with a custom requirement, we would say no. So we were okay, we have built these servers. We can fit the solution for you in these servers only. But we are not going to buy any hardware which is non-standard. So everything in software was open source or written by us. Everything on servers was designed by us in a way that you could do so we invented cloud before cloud was a word, in the sense that everything was uniform. We treated our servers like cattle, not like individual named servers. And I think that just naturally happened because of the constraints. So I think constraints play a big role in what shapes you.
Absolutely. And I think it's not a bad thing sometimes, because it helps you build a better business.
Right.
You're not reckless about building a business.
Right.
And And now just to summarize that part of the journey, 2009 to 18.
Right.
And 18 was an inflection point because you got capital for the first time in spades. We'll come to the IPO. Would you think that there was anything you could have changed about that trajectory, or would you change anything about yourselves that would have taken the company on a different path, or you're very zen about that and said, this is the best we could have done and we achieved everything we could have?
Very, very hard to predict the past. Of course,
simulation is very
in the
tough,
sense that it is unlikely anything would have changed. So because we were where we were and we were doing what needed to be done. And I think telling our story better wouldn't really have helped.
I think the most exciting, when VCs come and ask us or approach you, there's obviously a glimmer of hope.
Right.
I think the most exciting one I've had in your journey was when Lee asked whether you should look at this seriously.
So we had one tier 1 VC who would come in every year, would look at us and say that, oh, you have grown 100% more. They would assign an analyst. The analyst would understand what we were doing, how we were doing, what were the drivers for the business, what were the value drivers. We didn't know all these things. We were like, okay, why is this guy asking all these questions? So it's like, okay, like they may fund us, they may not fund us, but at least like 40% of their portfolio is our customer. So you can't say no to that particular VC and say that, okay, we are not going to talk to you.
Interesting, yeah. You have to take it to just keep the relationships going.
Right.
But actually, surprisingly, despite you saying that, and I feel in Lee's case, Lee is, by the way, the man for the first 10 years who ran Tiger Global in India. Obviously, claim to fame is Flipkart, Ola, and many other companies. But Lee too actually did the same thing. The difference is he pushed it to one of his anchor companies and asked them to do the evaluation of you.
Right.
And by then, I think top tier India, for some reason, looked down upon Indian providers and said, "Oh, there's no way this can. I can build better than this. AWS is better."
Narrative had turned towards B2C like almost completely. I think like SaaS infrastructure. I don't think like nobody got funded. There was, I think, a dry spell between
for about 3-4 years.
Like 2013 to 18, I think there was a complete dry spell for infra guys or SaaS guys, B2B guys to get funded.
No, but I think I've always given Lee the credit, and that's why I said I rue the point where he didn't take that final leap. If he's listening to this somewhere, sitting in Addition Capital in New York, but because he surprisingly was one of the few investors, foreign or Indian, who had more courage than most people in the ecosystem to back what he thought could be a local player who can build as well as a global player.
Right.
So that's why Ola versus an Uber, Flipkart versus an Amazon. And he said, like, if I find phenomenal founders, I'll allow them to go compete. So that's why I said I knew that trend line, and I said maybe he's going to make E2E the AWS of India. But yeah, E2E had its own plans to be the E2E of India. But now we'll do that. I think there's a lot happened in the 17 to pre-pandemic era, and it was happening very below the radar. And somehow people seem to have missed that part of the journey. And suddenly you come out of the blue like a white knight in 2023, 24.
Right.
But if you go back, then what changed? What changed in 17, 19?
Okay, so one was that, like, I think for the first time there was money in the bank, and I think people in the team went a bit overboard in terms of we can do a lot more. So I think the operating philosophy of do less kind of like went somewhere off the track. So that was one. The costs had risen, and the revenues were not simply picking up. And then I think at that point of time, we also had a very large customer who was doing almost 30-35% of our revenue, who got merged into another digital native. And then kind of like it was just a domain getting repointed to their old infra. And that like went away like one fine day, basically.
And we came back from 35 CR to 25 CR.
Yeah. So then it was like a struggle for next 2 years or 3 years. And then COVID came. And then COVID was when like everything digital was doing well. I think that was where the tailwinds for whatever skill sets we had developed on the GPU side really came to the fore for us. And like that was long before like OpenAI became the hit piece.
That's right.
So we were already doing like a lot more GPUs than anyone else in India in that era during the COVID. And we were solving problems that even the hyperscalers in India were not solving for their customers.
So now I know you've taken advantage of this being public in many ways. But if you go back to 17, I know we are also culprits. We kept pushing you to become the role model for the SME IPO because you were probably the only company other than maybe Exotel in the entire portfolio who fit the requirement.
Yes.
Right.
You were profitable for 2 to 3 years.
Right.
There was no other company, not leave alone our portfolio, and a lot of the Indian venture ecosystem, which should have qualified, right? At that point, I mean, behind our backs, what were you saying? Why are these Blume guys doing this to us? Or like, why are they pushing us?
No, not really. So for us, it was like, okay, let's do a small Series A round.
Yeah, but which wasn't happening, right? That's why we went this path.
Basically, like we treated it as an alternative to a Series A round.
Correct.
So I think long after that, I think many investors told me that like people are threatening us that, okay, we are going to do a SME IPO rather than take their round.
Yeah.
So I think we set that trend.
That's awesome. Shrishti, you were saying something.
I was saying that even the merchant banker, he was like, it was his first IPO. Obviously, it was our first. And then we started in November. And we did the IPO in May.
That's right.
The whole lot of endless amount of documentation was required. And
mostly I would have given up.
At one point, Tarun said let's not do it. It's too hard.
I think he said it every week, as far as I recall. He's like, that's why I said it was a very reluctant IPO CEO. And then from your lenses, what changed? Like as a CFO, of course you were reporting to us, but there was no other investor on the cap table. Now you're a public company CEO, for what it's worth.
See, for SME IPO, not much.
It's more liberal.
It's
6 months
liberal.
reporting.
6 months numbers reporting and not much pressure from the quarterly pressure is not there.
Yeah.
But once you move to the main board, which we did in 2022, quarter on quarter pressure of the numbers, endless investor calls, quarter on quarter, why has your revenue not increased it? You said that in the earnings call, what happened? So that pressure has always been there.
And that's continued even today.
That's continued even today.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know. I get calls. Even though Blume's not an investor. I said, I'm not in the picture. Why are you asking me? But even I get calls on E2E's help. But tell me, crazy interesting IPO. If I recall, what was it?
70 times it was over.
Yeah, but was the issue was about?
Issue was 21.99.
Yeah.
That included our secondary?
That included the secondary. I think the primary capital post the issue expenses.
So I'm going to reveal some secrets to the audience today.
We got was, I think, 14 crores.
14 CR we got in the bank account.
Firstly, it was a 21 crore plus IPO. Tarun made some of us sell our shares, not in a forced way, but in a kind, gentle way. And the hack was Tarun wanted to stay majority owner. Proper Indian, North Indian Banya founder. I want to be the owner. 51%. So he basically said he did the math and said, if you sell this much, I can continue to be the owner.
1/3.
But I think the bankers obviously went fairly aggressive on the pricing, which upset you. It upsets all founders, saying, why is it so aggressive? I could have left a lot more money on the table.
Right.
And that's how I think it felt, right?
Exactly.
What is the indicator for that? You were saying it, Shrishti, but I cut you. How much were you oversubscribed by?
We were oversubscribed by 70 times.
70 times. So 70 into that 21, we're talking about 1,500 crores of demand for that 21 crores. And of course, we can't get a benefit of that. And the guys who got allocated made out like bandits. How much did the stock run up on?
It was, the IPO price was 57. I think it went up to 85 on the first day.
On the first day. Massive pop. And I got innumerable calls for the next month or two. How do we take a company's SMB IPO? I said, most of them won't qualify. They either don't make money or the SMB market is so harsh that it won't value your fancy valuations.
Right.
Off the bat, this is a non-starter for most companies, which most people couldn't make a sense of. And the people who want to take the lessons did, right? Like Infolian later took a leaf out of your page. Another fund one company.
Yes.
And I think Gaurav said, I want to learn, and came and became a board member.
Right.
Learned, and then he took it SMB IPO 4-5 years later. But then, as you said, did it change the company's culture in terms of saying, oh, we're flush with money? Or was it just the setback from the customer who went away?
I think both things went hand in hand. We were spending a lot more money than we were used to. So there was I think some letting go of okay, now we can do this, now we can do that. And the second part is then we got hit with revenue loss and we were this will make it up. But then eventually it became a very slow process.
So the frugality runs in our DNA. So till date, I've never traveled business class. I can't get myself to pay 3 times the amount of money.
I sometimes cheaply get the free upgrades because sometimes the airline gives you coupons, but like that's about it.
It shows in the culture of the firm. And what advice would you have from that experience on younger founders who think, well, first, like you, are wary of going public, and B, do you think it's a better mechanism sometimes than chasing private money from your experience?
I think like okay, so I would say that like there is a clean path of going public and kind of like doing everything clinically and cleanly. I think that is a recommended path. Like, don't fall into the trap of making people happy. So whether they are happy or unhappy, like ultimately it is the founder or the entrepreneur who has to run the business for what is best for the business, not for the optics. So I think that's the main advice I have for people wanting to go public, that like don't play optics, work on your business as if you were private.
I would like to add on.
Yes,
here.
Of course. Please.
So the IPO is never an exit for the founders.
Yeah, just a continuation of the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a trust vote from the public, and you have to build on that.
Absolutely. Well said. And I know Srishti has accumulated and espoused a lot more wisdom than Tarun has. We have a book to show for it, which I'll come to. But now, if you take a step back and look at, so I can speak for myself, and people would always wonder, when most of my friends who have now bought are E2E shareholders, and I recommended it, they always say, why did you sell? And I can speak for myself, and I'm curious to know what your team and your organization thought of how the trajectory was. For 5 years, the stock really didn't move much. Right. You went public in 2018. You got super excited from the first few weeks. Then it just settled down. Your performance being reported every 6 months.
Right.
Nobody knows what to make of this company. Right. And the stock's just flat, right? And approximately. And then we had two pressures. I think the fact that it was flat, we said, it's not like we were not in touch with Tarun. Tarun would say, I can't say much. I'm now a public company.
Right.
and so it's like, what just happened here? All our conversations have become like, very official. This is a good time to talk about IDFC First Bank, our seasoned partner. IDFC First Bank has earned its reputation as one of India's most startup-friendly banks through its First Wings program, which provides dedicated mentorship and tailored financial solutions to help early-stage ventures scale effectively. Coincidentally, many of Blume's portfolio companies, much later stage, also partner with IDFC First Bank for their banking and financial needs. If you're well-funded and scaling, there are great lending and banking partners, and our portfolio companies would attest to that. But apart from that, we always believed in whatever you spelt out as a vision, buying into the GPU story, which obviously reshaped the company. So you have to talk about that, which is partly why you got this seat today, by the way. You're like a hot AI company now. So, and while we went through that phase, I think we just got worn out. Like if we had not been on cap table, we wouldn't have. But like then the regulator was putting pressure on us to get the fund closed. Right. And so the first time your stock popped and grew 3, 4, 5x, we said maybe the moment has come. And we were drip selling. And then Tarun would say, what can I do? Like the market's not able to absorb 5-7% of the company that you own. So when it happened, we sold. And that was one of the biggest upside misses of Blume's history. And maybe it'll stay that way for the next 15 years. Because basically, I think we sold at somewhere close to 250 crore market cap. And you have all of it, most of it, and you went to 9,000 at one point. And now I think you're settled somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000. What happened? I don't think you expected it. I don't think we expected it.
Nobody expected it.
So first, take that in two parts. Both of you can speak from both your perspectives.
Sure.
What did you change between 19 and 21 that this happened? I know you alluded to GPUs, etc. Was the dramatic lift off from Sam Altman's announcement or unveiling OpenAI?
I think that was the second inflection point.
Okay.
The first inflection point was COVID, of course.
So go through those 2 points for me.
Sure.
And then
So I think, like,
we'll come to the
our
stock journey, which is
very
the fun ride.
early GPU journey started for us in, like, I think 2016 or 17.
Why don't you give a 2-minute ready reckoner for the audience on what does this GPU world mean?
Sure.
And what is the context of it in what we're seeing today?
Sure.
Where AI is what most people speak about day in day
I
out.
think, like, I'll speak to the old hats in the Linux
Explain
world.
it to my mother.
The people who read /dot. So I think, like, 25 years back, like, I think, like, people on /dot were raving about, like, how a GPU can kind of, like, either draw triangles or rectangles, I don't remember which, and that involves, like, doing a lot of parallel math calculations. And there were people who had started using GPUs for doing maths in like parallel computations. I think that was the early trend of people catching on to desktop GPUs, using those very powerful processors to do a lot of things in parallel. So I think that kept on being there, and to NVIDIA's credit, they caught on to that trend, owned that trend, and kind of, like, fed into that by giving the libraries to those people who had been doing those kind of experiments. And I think that has stood them in like good stead.
Yeah.
And for us, like, of course, like, there were people who were doing analytics, people who wanted to do their analytics stuff on GPUs. And we knew GPUs as the add-on for a desktop machine. They were like, okay, like, shall we put it into the server? And I think, like, there was a lot of pain in terms of how to get those GPUs virtualized. And we succeeded in cracking those kind of problems. And kind of, like, we were making some amount of revenue. It was like we never thought of it as... So we had, like, a concept called moonshots. So where we said that, okay, we are going to do a WordPress as a service. We are going to do something on the GPUs.
I remember.
We were also talking about, like, how to run Tally on Linux.
Yes.
To avoid the licensing costs. We had a very frugal mindset, and we thought that, okay, when
customers will also enjoy
customers will also enjoy the cost cutting over there. Of course, none of those moonshots worked. Now for GPU, it was actually one of the Blume startups who came to us and said that, like, look, this costs X amount on a hyperscaler, and we feel that this is too expensive. We were like, yeah, this looks expensive because a typical GPU costs only, like, less than $1,000. So nobody should be charging you $2,000 for a GPU per month. And that kind of opened our eyes that, okay, like, people are selling GPUs and we are not even aware of it. Like, this is a moonshot we are missing. So we said, like, okay, let's go and invest some money into the GPUs. We bought, like, I think 20 of them. These were enterprise GPUs. Each one of them costed about 6 lakh or 7 lakhs.
Oh, wow.
And the desktop GPUs used to cost, like, I think 50,000-60,000 rupees.
Okay.
And then suddenly we had people from NVIDIA knocking our doors and, like, who are these guys who are buying these 20 GPUs? Nobody has bought, like, that many enterprise GPUs in one shot. So I think the sales guy at the distributor who sold those became a rock star over there. And the NVIDIA team was like, okay, like, let us figure out E2E.
Yeah.
And to their credit, I think, like, they worked with us. We did a lot of things together, not many successful. But I think the inflection came finally at the time of COVID. Like, next couple of years were a struggle on the GPU division. It was not a separate division or anything, but, like, there was struggle in terms of, like, how to fill up those GPUs. So, but then we learned a lot because that was some expensive hardware we bought. So we had to monetize it. So with that respect, that if an investment has to be made, it has to be made back. We had to learn GPUs because of that one, the flying high kind of a decision that, like the Srishti said, like, Tarun goes and flies high in the sky. He builds castles in the sky and then, like, does something. And then we have to figure out, like, the whole team has to figure out, like, okay, how to make money out of this.
This is a case, though, where you said build and they will come, and they did come.
Right.
But you made it happen.
Right.
No, but credit to you.
It happened, like, the times changed and the GPU started
the
working.
Revenue trajectory hadn't taken off that much before your stock trajectory took off, right? And
No, I think it was... so I think, like, they have been divergent trajectories. So where we are like, okay, we had done really well this quarter. The stock, like, probably will, like, shoot off like crazy. And then nobody understands what these people are doing. and there is like the stock actually falls. It's like, what happened? We did so well this quarter.
Yeah.
The stock has actually fallen.
Yeah.
Like, does nobody understand our business? So,
How has that journey been, Shrishti? Just I can't even imagine how it must be to see your stock hit upper circuit for like months at end, right?
Just to give some perspective,
Yeah.
so a GPU has 17,000 cores,
Yeah.
and a typical CPU is 300 to 400 cores.
Yeah.
So that is the processing
two of the
capacity.
CPUs have 300 to 400.
That is the processing capacity of a GPU
Correct,
as compared to
correct.
the CPU.
Correct.
So for my personal part, I do not check the stock price daily. I check it like once or twice a week.
Yeah.
So like we keep on getting calls, like price is increasing.
Yeah.
Like,
but
what has
will-
happened?
Yeah, you're
So
still
we always
answerable as
say
CFO at that point at
This
least.
is
Yeah.
the standard answer. We can't talk about it.
Okay.
We have nothing to say on that.
Okay.
But that was like really, really overwhelming and surreal at the same time.
Yeah.
That it went to 5,200, 5,300.
Yeah.
And it was like what just happened?
Yeah. No, and in fact, it was funny because I think Tarun's on that chat. We still have a Blume Fund 1 chat. And I had said something like, someday soon when your stock was going up, that Tarun will become our first publicly listed billion-dollar company.
Yes.
And it just didn't stop. It went all the way and shot past the mark. I said, it's already here. No, but I'm thinking also at a personal level, I know you guys don't go to work every day and say how much wealth have we created, etc. But how did this change employee morale and people's, self-worth or for all those years of hard work? Did they feel like their destiny was also avenged? And that
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for the ESOPs, it's a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah.
If you are listed, like people in our company, they have made upwards of, if I can say that number, upwards of
multiple millionaires and multimillionaires.
Fantastic.
And,
It's a
and
very fulfilling
it
feeling to
has
see that happen.
helped us attract talent, retain talent. The ESOP part, it has been wonderful for the people.
And what is the discussion at home when you saw your wealth grow 5% every day?
The only
I think at one
discussion
point of time we stopped looking at it. Basically.
The only discussion, I think, I keep on telling Tarun, don't tell Saisha. She has to figure out her own part. Don't tell this is the paper money.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell her how much money to pay. She keeps on asking us, and
Okay.
I'm very conservative.
No,
about it.
there was a phase where I remember we used to get boatload of calls. By then we had sold. So why the hell did you sell? This thing is going up every day. And then I remember you came in because you thought now the company has hit a point where it's a good time to bring in an institutional investor.
Yes.
Do a QIP. We were talking to bankers in our office. I mean, we were helping in whatever way we can. And a bunch of strategics were looking at you as well. But even that juncture, everybody missed the boat once more. Like if you think about it from that IPO, from the last round IPO round also qualifies. From that round to 3,000-4,000 crores, there was no institutional investor who participated, right?
Right.
Other than maybe a public market investor. What did they miss again at the 1,000 crore valuation mark? I know a bunch of people could have gotten in. But what were they missing? And what did you get right, you think? And what have you got right now? What does E2E of the next 5 years look like?
I think although we didn't get the Series A venture money, but I think we learned a lot from the venture ecosystem, especially from the Blume ecosystem. I think we were always true to our metrics that, okay, these are the metrics to grow. These are the metrics to track. What's the North Star metric for everyone in the team? So I think that discipline doesn't really show outside. Because a lot of these things are your internal metrics to track that how well you're doing in terms of basically the progress you're making. This is more qualitative performance. It doesn't really reflect into revenues all the time. So I think looking from outside, the amount of information you have is what you publish. So, and see, mostly qualitative information gets discounted in India. That's why there is no money for R&D. That's why there is so little venture money. I used to think that, okay, every day we are seeing someone or the other getting funded. Then when someone showed me the actual stats, it was shocking that only 25% of the startups actually get seed money.
Yeah.
Another 25% out of that get Series A. Another 25% out of that get to Series B.
Yes.
And so on. And
the funnel is very, very sharp.
The funnel is super sharp. So
many valleys of death before you emerge on the other side.
Right.
Unless
So-
you're in control of your fate and turn profitable very soon, which is what you guys did. Yeah. Go
Right.
ahead.
So I think like it's in a way like when you are already successful, when it has shown up in the numbers which you have published, then everyone realizes your story. But then when you are telling your story without the backing of numbers, it's just another qualitative story. You are one amongst thousands or tens of thousands of entrepreneurs who is telling your story. Like very, very hard for people to judge whether you're right or wrong. So there is always an element of hit and miss. So for a typical institution, like they get like so many of these pitches. I think many of them would be successful, many of them would be failures.
Yeah.
So I think there is an element of luck over there
What is changed in
on both sides.
No,
Like even for
absolutely.
entrepreneurs, like basically some of them could have become very successful, found no backing.
Yeah.
And for institutions also, they could just have missed the bus with that particular entrepreneur who could become the next.
Absolutely.
I feel we were even not telling our story. Like we were not out there.
Hmm.
When we were out there, that was August 2024. Then we reached a 400C around in September.
I remember that. Yeah. So now in that sequence, two things happened. You raised a round after a very long time, and you also have like a new big investor in the form of a strategic L&T. So since you touched upon it, Srishti, like what has that done? Of course, you have boatloads of cash reserves. You've built so frugally, and for the first time, you have 400 crores in the bank.
Yes.
And then L&T also comes in, infuses capital. So you have a rich balance sheet compared to all your first 13 years, 14 years. What has that done in terms of ambition for the company? And what does the L&T thing mean? Not, again, qualitatively. I mean, you can't get into confidential stuff. But what does it mean for the trajectory of the company in your view? From what little...
See, for the first time, we had so much money in the bank.
Yeah.
So with L&T, we're still figuring it out. It's very early to say. They're opening lots of doors for us, and they are guiding us. But like the actual synergy is yet to happen.
So hopefully, lot more to unlock
Yes.
as we go along.
Yes.
And on the math itself, as the business changed with this GPU focus and what AI is doing, what does E2E today look like, which was very different from say 4-5 years ago? And what does E2E 5 years from now look like compared to today?
Okay, I think like we have just started investing into the long-term future.
Okay.
Like, see, that part of the journey has just started for us. So I think for a long time, it was like what you need today and tomorrow is what we were building for. So I think like people attribute vision after they see success. I think mostly it's a post facto story that entrepreneurs and their advisors and their marketing folks, they help them build.
Yeah.
So now today what we are looking at is that basically so there is a global narrative today of like sovereign AI and sovereignty.
Yeah.
Now we happen to be in that space because of our constraints. We had to build all our software ourselves. We had to package the open source. So today there are 3 levels of sovereignty. So one level is where your data is sitting in your country.
Yes.
Second level is where data is sitting on hardware which is owned by an Indian company, not subject to extraterritorial jurisdictions.
Yes.
Third level is where your software is also provided by an Indian company, again not subject to any kind of extraterritorial laws,
licensing and laws,
and an ability to kind of like stymie you at the most inopportune moment. So I think like for us, like basically what has changed is that like we are looking at like, okay, what is happening in the world and investing for the future in terms where we don't just see that, okay, are we a cloud GPU company? Yes, we are. Are we a traditional cloud company which does everything that a normal hyperscaler is expected to do? Yes, we do. The third part is that we have also become like a software business today, although there is no revenue to attribute to software. But we are building a lot of software for with a view that like a lot of people will eventually be able to use this software as the sovereign AI and sovereignty for the cloud takes off. So in a way, from being a trend follower, like now we are trying to set the trend today. So let's see how far we are successful in that.
Clearly, it looks like you're building for posterity in some sense. I mean, whether you retain your current titles or not, you want this to become
right.
and I know L&T has some part of the business, but where would you like to be?
Let me
10
tie
years
that
from now?
into the story. So
Yeah.
basically, so L&T happened to be the very best partner for this vision. Why? Because
Same thing.
This is
Indian-
not money coming from outside
Correct,
India.
Indian
This is
company,
Indian money to build an Indian
very
business.
forward-looking company, professionally run. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And build innovation in India. I think we could not have found a better partner than L&T.
And therefore, if you had to stare down the 10-year tunnel, what do you think you both dream of on the other side of it?
See, I think AI is going to be the new electricity of the world. It will be so fundamental for every organization, every industry, every individual. And as E2E, we see ourselves as being the power grid of that.
That's a very good way to place it. And otherwise, from a mission cell, vision cell, as you said, now that you have the luxury of doing it,
Yes.
Right.
What does that look like inside of E2E today?
Okay. So
what do you tell your team?
We are not really a family-run business.
Of course,
although a lot of family is working in it, but we are not a family-run business. We want to stay a professional company.
Yeah.
So at some point of time, maybe 10 years down the line, once we have
I know both of you are young. You can run it for 20 if you want.
Yeah, maybe 10, maybe 20.
Yeah.
But eventually, means it would be a fully professional setup. So where we would be able to sit back and say that, okay, we built something for India. We built something for every member of our team, no matter when they joined us. And hopefully we made something for all our investors, no matter when they came into E2E. So I think that's a broad part of how we think about our relationship with E2E today.
That's fantastic. But and from a legacy, of course, we also picked a theme which is all of these are themes that we pick for Blume Day and becomes a part of a t-shirt, and that's why we picked you as a guest this season. Always have the underdog element. People wrote you off in some sense and you said, screw you, I'm going to actually build against the odds and deliver.
I think that was never the case. Mostly we were okay, we have got a customer who has got a problem, let's go and solve it. So
fantastic.
We were never worried about that. Okay, we have to prove something to anyone.
Well said. My bad. So you're motivated by solving that problem so deeply. We've arrived here, and of course that continues. But what do you think of a legacy to leave behind, in the sense that we built something special in this country? I know you've already articulated an India-first hardware, hosting, solutioning, and software company, which makes us proud of building a native AI company. But
right, I think that draws from what you have said many times, that India should not become a digital colony. So I think the fundamental elements of that is that if you look at the top 5,000 companies of India by market cap and look at the amount of cash they generate, I think a lot of that cash goes into generating immediate returns rather than funding innovative startups. Mostly a lot of cash is sitting in the banks.
Yeah.
I think that is something of a personal mission, that if we can prove that we took Indian cash, built something with longevity around that, and showed that don't just sit with the cash in the banks, basically invest in more Taruns.
In a peculiar
so
way,
I'm not there yet, but maybe.
In a peculiar way, you're a remarkable role model for that journey to be all Indian in some sense.
Right.
Founders like us will get the funding then.
Awesome. No, I have to give you the last word, Srishti. I know a lot of what I must admit, it's not we have interacted so much that I understand you at the core as much as I understand.
I was always sitting at the back and working.
quietly absorbing the strength behind Arman's flight of fancy, literally sitting on the cloud. But what prompted the book? Obviously, you took an effort of articulating a lot of things. Even before the book was out, I started seeing Srishti posts every week. Right. And you clearly reflected a lot on this journey. What were you trying to say? Was it for yourself? Was it to tell? Obviously, there's always an audience. That's why you write a book. But what were you trying to achieve with it? And what has the response been? I've gone through parts of it, but my opinion is one thing. But what is the response? What has been the most heartfelt moments that have come out of the reward of writing this book?
So I have people have sent me messages saying that at least like it has make them think about their mindset now, and it has changed their life.
And you originally started writing it because?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So I was living in a very pressure cooker environment. Like everything seemed to sometimes like falling, motherhood, startup, work, aging parents. And it seemed like I was living in a fight or fight response most of the time. And I started having some kind of physical ailments, nothing like much, but like small ailments. And then I started listening to podcasts, the spiritual podcasts, and the mind body connection books. I read many of them, and then I thought, like, I think it's the stress that is causing all those physical ailments. Then one day, what I did was I did an experiment on me. I observed my thoughts, and I realized that all of those were related to the past or the future. I was not living in the present moment. So this book has been born out of that awakening. I have shared my experiences, many stories, anecdotes, office stories, personal stories. And it's a self-help book, but not a typical self-help book. I have tried to make it more relatable.
Both me and Sasha use the book to beat her up. So when
You
she's
have written
saying
this in the
something,
book.
you're like, have you read that chapter in your book?
Use it against her.
Yeah. To win an argument.
So before I let both of you go, we'll do a fun rapid fire. I don't have all of them memorized, so I'm going to use my cheat sheet. But so both of you can answer, one of you can answer. What is tougher to debug, cloud architecture or a marital disagreement?
Marital argument.
And how about you? You go to the
Same,
data
same,
center. Same. What's one AI trend you think is overhyped?
It will replace human creativity. It will not.
How about you?
I think the same.
Same.
So basically, humans would always be needed. So
with no qualifications, Jensen Huang or Sam Altman?
Jensen, always.
Jensen.
Huge Jensen fans. And if Tarun and Srishti swapped CXO roles for a week, what's most likely to break in the other's department?
It will be chaos.
Everything.
Everything. Fantastic. You clearly found your places in the org. What are your go-to stress busters? Long drive, chai break, debating tech with the team. Do you have different ones, same ones?
I think like when we have tea time together.
I think that's the best part of the day.
Okay. And you reset at that point. Super. And what's more nerve-wracking? Checking your share price or reacting to customer feedback?
I think it's always the customer.
Yeah.
So mostly I don't even check the share price.
Yeah. It's awesome. No, I think you could glean enough of that from the conversation. And what is the most stressful part about customer feedback? That their business is down even for a minute? Is that?
No, I think like basically, see in tech world, like everyone gives their paradigm to the customer. So basically you have to first understand the paradigm from which they are coming from. Sometimes you are able to solve for that paradigm. Sometimes you are not able to solve for that. Sometimes it just feels unfair that, okay, like the customer is stuck and there is no way to help the customer because of like the choices that were made for the customer without their control. So
have you become ardent users of AI tools, and what do you end up using every day?
I use ChatGPT a lot.
Yeah. How about you, Tarun?
So I'm trying to spend more time on our own playground. So dog fooding our own AI.
Nice. And anything that is ready to play with on your
a lot. So,
and usually for developers or even common users like us.
Even end users can use it, although the journey is harder for an end user. But typically the target is B2B, so it's not super easy to do for something an end user can do. So,
and any examples of funny prompts that you use with ChatGPT?
Not for me, but like I once saw Saisha. She was asking ChatGPT to tell some gossip. Because she wants to make her life interesting. And then it replied back with a very personal Damat story.
Well, I think, it's been a pleasure hosting both of you. And I'm glad we have multiple examples of what a success story in India looks like. I think you embody, break the myth that a wife and husband cannot be a great complement professionally and play your roles in a company and see it to glory. And it's not like 5 years, 10 years, it's been over a decade now. Second is I love this part about how everything about E2E, strangely, it never hit me before, is very Indian. There's almost like nobody else karmically could participate in it. Yeah, right? It just grew as a desi company, and hopefully it continues, in that fashion. It's been a fantastic ride. I continue to, full disclosure, be a personal shareholder. So thanks for the ride, and keep making money for whatever little amount I've allocated in E2E stock. I'll be a happy shareholder for as long as you guys are running the show. And I think, again, thanks for coming over and making this episode very special for us. Because, as I said, we want you to be the first of many Blume public companies that we have on the Blume podcast. Because these, amongst the special stories we bring, these are extra special.
Yeah.
So
you being the only institutional investor till like 2018 into E2E till we went public.
Yeah.
So that makes it very special.
In general, I think even if others join, we're happy to share.
Right.
But it is extra special because there were so many firsts that you can't recreate this, right? And it was a remarkable journey and story, and I'm hoping the audience enjoys it, and we hopefully brought it to life so that a lot more people enjoy the story. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Today, I have to gift you you have to exchange rings again in life. So the ultra human rings. So nothing better for a couple than to get 2 health, and sleep monitoring rings. So this is a sizing kit actually. It's not the ring.
Okay.
So you have to give the sizing kit, the choice of color, what material you want. Do you want it engraved with each other's names? So they do all this cool stuff.
Cool.
No, they'll just add your name. It's not that crazy. But I hope you enjoy it. We're a proud shareholder, as you know, and growing like crazy in the US. Again, another great story. If we can make an Indian consumer durable product go global, I think it'll be one more example of what you would like to see in the world, Tarun.
Right.
And thanks for this, Srishti. I'm going to get you an autograph. And we have another author in the house, which is fantastic. More and more books getting written by Blume founders and Blumiers. So thank you for this again. And we also have a goodie bag. So we haven't marked the bags, but you'll know by your t-shirt sizes who's who's.
Right.
So,
but they're both the same apart from the t-shirt. Right?
Apart from the t-shirt, they both are the same. Again, thank you for everything.
Cool. Thank you.